8. Nazi half-track vehicle. In 2015, a half-track vehicle that belonged to the Warmech during World War II was pulled from the Pilica River in Poland, near the village of Gorki. It was buried for more than 70 years and was spectacularly preserved. The vehicle's wheels still rotated, its tracks were still attached, and some of its original paint job was still visible. Known as SD KFZ-250, this light armored half-track vehicle was designed starting in 1939. It started rolling off the production line in 1941 due to manufacturing delays. Powered by a 6-cylinder gasoline engine, it was typically mounted with 1 or 2 machine guns. Designed to supplement the standard half-track machine, the SD KFZ-250 played a variety of roles throughout the conflict. It functioned as a troop carrier, a personal command vehicle for battalion and other commanders, and in reconnaissance, artillery observer, and radio roles. 7. Nazi river wrecks. In 2022, severe droughts impacted a large portion of the globe, with water levels in many places reaching historic lows. It's an unfortunate situation, but has had the unintended effect of revealing dozens of long-lost shipwrecks, ancient villages, and other pieces of history that were either lost or unknown until recently. In Serbia, which suffered its worst drought in decades along with the rest of Europe, more than a dozen World War II-era German shipwrecks appeared in the Danube River. They were spotted near the port town of Prahovo and were identified as being part of the Nazis' Black Sea Fleet. The Germans intentionally scuttled the ships in 1944 to prevent them from falling into the hands of the advancing Russians. They took around 10,000 unexploded explosives to the river bottom, leaving behind a mess that Serbian authorities claim will cost an estimated $30 million to clean up. When news of the discovery broke, officials said that they expected more bomb-laden ships to turn up as water levels continued to dip even lower. And while the items that turned up during the drought were certainly interesting and exciting, the historically dry conditions in Europe signified nothing good. Throughout the summer, the continent's shipping routes, food supplies, and electricity all fell under the threat of the excessive heat and other effects of climate change. 6. Australian warplane in the jungle. There are between 500 and 600 World War II plane wrecks throughout Papua New Guinea, but many remain undiscovered due to their remote locations deep in the jungle. In 2022, a young man named Willie Flynn discovered one of these lost wrecks in the wilderness of East New Britain, outside the town of Rabaul. He began searching for it with help from family and friends after receiving a tip from a local boar hunter, who told him about some wreckage they stumbled across while tracking their wild prey. After an hours-long hike that included numerous river crossings and climbing up and down a mountain, Willie's group finally found the wreck. At one point throughout the journey, he collapsed from not eating enough, and he also injured his ankle. And he told ABC Australia that it was worth all the suffering he went through to reach the mess of debris scattered along a hillside. They initially found pieces of propellers, doors, and several guns. A large portion of the wreck sat buried in the mud for decades until Willie and his group began digging it up. About 10 feet down, they found a control column, which helped them identify it as a World War II-era Australian Beaufort aircraft. They also uncovered human bones and pieces of a watch and pilot's vest. The plane may have belonged to the small contingent of Australian troops who guarded Rabaul until it was captured in 1942 by the Japanese, who established a major naval and air base there. Throughout the remainder of the war, the region endured intensive Allied bombing raids. Chief Israel Joseph of nearby Barham village told ABC Australia that stories of wartime activity have been passed down from one generation to the next. He said that his grandfather remembered seeing the plane crash land after being shot at. Joseph encountered the wreck site about 15 years earlier and took efforts to protect it until Willie volunteered to explore and document it. Now that the downed aircraft is widely known about, though, he's worried that people will disturb it, which is reportedly a common problem among Papua New Guinea's historic wrecks. There are also concerns about wrecks being destroyed by logging operations. Willie and his team are racing against the clock in hopes of further identifying the plane. So far, the parts have been too rusted to reveal visible numbers or are still buried. But they haven't given up yet, and the Australian Defence Force plans to carry out its own investigation in 2023. What would you do if you discovered a missing plane? Tell us in the comments and hit subscribe while you're at it. 5. Vanished submarine. On April 18, 1943, civilians in the Italian town of Monopoli, along the country's Adriatic coast, overheard a loud blast offshore. On that same day, in the same region, the British submarine HMS Regent vanished. Over the following weeks, the bodies of 4 men dressed in British submarine gear washed ashore, but they were never formally identified, and the rest of the 62-member crew were never found. The vessel itself also remained missing for nearly 80 years. Surviving family members of the lost crew members were hopeful when a sunken submarine was discovered 70 miles north of Monopoli in 2003. It was initially identified as the Regent, only for experts to realize it was an Italian wreck. In late 2022, divers found what they believe is the real Regent wreck with help from the Italian Naval League, LNI. It was discovered just 19 miles away from Monopoli near Villanova di Ostuni, making it likely that the sub had been properly identified this time. The wreck sits upside down at a depth of 246 feet. While it has yet to be officially identified, it bears telltale features and measurements of a British-designed submarine. Barry Trice, whose father William was the submarine's chief engine room artificer, told the press that the wreck's location lines up perfectly with the ill-fated Regent's final movements. The submerged vessel also appears to be damaged in ways that are consistent with having struck a mine, which falls in line with eyewitness accounts of hearing an explosion the day it happened. There were also no other submarines in the area that day, further adding to the likelihood that the Regent has been found. Experts hope that the discovery will help bring long-awaited closure to the descendants of the Regent's long-missing crew, whose fate was uncertain until recently. 4. A long-missing fighter pilot. Sharon Estelle Taylor was just 3 weeks old when her father, a 22-year-old American fighter pilot named First Lieutenant Shannon Estelle, was shot down over Germany in April 1945. It was unclear whether he bailed from the plane before it succumbed to enemy fire, but his body was never found. He was deemed unaccounted for, and his wife Mary stopped receiving letters from him. Estelle was eventually classified as killed in action, despite his missing remains. Taylor told the National Geographic that she vowed during her childhood to someday find her father's remains and bring them home. She spent decades piecing together his wartime journey together, through letters and other records, and with help from eyewitnesses and experts, including historians and archaeologists. During her research, Taylor learned that Estelle and 10 other pilots were sent on a mission to destroy a train station and Nazi power lines. In the early 2000s, German military aviation historian Hans-Günther Ploes found a piece of Estelle's downed plane along with some human bone fragments near the town of Elsnig in Saxony. An American recovery team from what's now known as the Department of Defense POW/MIA Accounting Agency, DPAA, collected the bones in 2005, and in 2006, DNA analysis confirmed that they were Estelle's remains. Taylor and her family finally gave him a proper burial later that year at Arlington National Cemetery, bringing her decades-long quest to bring her father home to a solemn but fulfilling end. Her discoveries led to the production of a sound and light show featured at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans that tells her parents' story and also tells a larger story about war casualties and the families who were affected by them. 3. A toxic wreck. During World War II, the German Navy requisitioned a civilian fishing trawler called the V1302 John Mann as a patrol boat. In early 1942, the vessel participated in the evacuation of German warships from Brest Harbor in France, where they were essentially trapped by the British. Known as Operation Cerberus or the Channel Dash, the extremely risky mission commenced under Hitler's orders that the ship should dash up the English Channel and back to Germany. The John Mann was one of more than 200 escort vessels who was tasked with guiding the ships along their journey. At some point, the Allies intercepted the convoy, and the trawler was hit by 2 bombs and pelted with machine gun fire, leaving the crew with no choice but to abandon ship as the John Mann began to slip below the waves. It was the only ship that sank during the Channel Dash, despite the convoy coming under heavy Allied gunfire. 27 crew members were rescued, one of whom later died from his injuries, and 11 others were presumed dead. Today, the wreck sits at a depth of 115 feet in the Belgian part of the North Sea. It's largely intact, but highly hazardous due to the presence of multiple unexploded depth charges on board. The wreck also carried munitions and coal reserves to the seafloor. A 2022 study revealed that the toxic pollutants impacted nearby marine microbiology and the geochemistry of the seafloor. Samples were found to contain arsenic, heavy metals including nickel and copper, explosive compounds, and chemicals that naturally occur in fuel, known as polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons or PAHs. The John Mann is just one of many shipwrecks from both world wars that are responsible for the presence of somewhere between 2.5 million and 20.4 million metric tons of petroleum products throughout the world's oceans. And while it's understandable that people pay attention to wrecks more out of a fascination about their history than anything else, study author Josephine van Landuit mentioned the importance of not overlooking the environmental impacts of sunken wartime vehicles. 2. Deepest World War II wrecks ever found. In 2020, marine explorers announced the discovery of the US Navy destroyer USS Johnston, which sank to the bottom of the Philippine Sea in October 1944. It went down during the Battle of Leyte Gulf, which is widely considered one of the largest naval battles of all time and one of the war's most major battles. The 377-foot-long vessel sits at a depth of 21,325 feet, making it the deepest wreck ever found at the time of its discovery. In another historic first, a team led by retired US naval officer and explorer Victor Vescovo descended nearly 4 miles to the seafloor to explore the Johnston, in the deepest ever shipwreck dive at the time. They surveyed 2/3 of the wreck, which bore a visible hull number of 577. Several fixtures were still visibly in place, including gun turrets, twin torpedo racks, and numerous gun mounts. The Johnston sustained heavy damage from being hit by the Japanese Navy battleship Yamato, which was the biggest warship ever built at the time. Out of 327 crew members, 141 survived. Shortly after discovering the Johnston, Vescovo's team found the nearby wreck of another American ship that sank during the Battle of Leyte Gulf. Known as the USS Samuel B. Roberts, it was discovered even deeper than the Johnston at 22,621 feet beneath the waves. The Japanese fleet far exceeded the Samuel B. Roberts' capabilities. Its captain, Robert W. Copeland, nevertheless led it bravely into the fight. Despite being destroyed in the battle, the ship played a key role in securing an American victory, and it went down in history as a destroyer that fought like a battleship. 1. Italian submarine wreck. Built in 1932, the Giantina was one of 7 Argonauta-class submarines that served for the Regia Marina, or the Royal Italian Navy. She first saw combat while supporting Spanish nationalists during the Spanish Civil War of 1936–39 and went on to serve in World War II. The 200-foot-long Giantina left the Greek island of Leros on July 5, 1941 with 48 sailors aboard. In what's been described as a rare submarine-to-submarine encounter, she was struck by torpedoes from the British HMS Torbay and sank in the Aegean Sea. There were only 6 survivors who managed to swim to the nearby island of Delo. In November 2021, a team of explorers led by renowned Greek diver Kostas Thoktorides discovered the Giantina wreck off the island of Mykonos using a remotely operated vehicle. The downed sub sits 338 feet beneath the waves and is the 4th wrecked submarine that Thoktorides has found. Speaking with Reuters, he described the confrontation between the Giantina and the HMS Torbay as a rare naval event. Through its records, Italy's Naval History Office officially confirmed the wreck's identity as the Giantina. Thanks for watching. Which one of these World War II discoveries shocked you the most? Tell us in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.